And welcome in, everybody, to the Last Row Podcast, a fan's perspective on sports. It's Brian here inside the ARM Media Solutions Studios on this Monday night, March the 30th, 2026. Hope you are well. Hope you are happy. Wherever it is you may be listening, we do appreciate and thank you so much for being a part of the program each and every night. You are. If you are listening on either Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, thank you so much for doing so. We greatly appreciate the support and the subscribers and the ratings and the listening. Keep it up, folks. We're making some headway here, which is always a good thing. Also, if you are joining us on YouTube Live, welcome in. We do thank you so much for being a part of the show here. And we are thankful to have you a part of it as well. If you're joining us on Amazon Music, welcome in as well. You can check us out live through our socials via Twitter or X at Last Row Podcast. You can also check us out on TikTok Live. Check us out there at last.row.podcast. You can also check out our website, www.lastrowpodcast.com. That's where you can find a link to all of our sponsors, and you can find out all the information that you are looking for. We do appreciate all of our sponsors, including Forever Finds Thrift and I Know a Guy Remodeling. We'll hear from them here in just a little bit. All right, lots to dissect, lots to get to here this evening, and want to start by talking about the news of the evening here, which is that the Chicago Bulls have parted ways with guard Jaden Ivey after his anti-homophobic or his homophobic slurs and conduct detrimental to the team. And they waived him today after he posted a lengthy video online on social media about religion and other topics that included anti-gay sentiments. Ivey has gone live on his Instagram account more frequently in the past week, posting 3 lengthy videos. This is per ESPN Jamal Collier. And look, let's just cut to the chase here, okay? Because if you haven't seen the post from him, I implore you not to. It's not good. It doesn't look good for the NBA, and more importantly, it does not look good for the Chicago Bulls. And in particular, one person on the Chicago Bulls. Actually, 2 people. The first person is Arturas Karnisovas. It doesn't look good for AK here, and here's the reason why. It looks bad. It looks real bad. And the reason why it looks real bad is quite simple. AK got Jaden Ivey from Detroit. He was drafted with the number 5 overall pick in 2022 from the Pistons. And featured early before knee issues limited him to just 30 games in 2024 and 25 and kept him out the first 15 games of this season. He appeared in only 4 games with the Bulls and last played February 11th before the All-Star break. The team announced that he would be shut down for the season because of a sore left knee. Now, this is not a good look for Arturas Karnisovas. Realistically, and this comes from multiple people within the Bulls organization that cover, or not within the Bulls organization, but that cover the Bulls organization. There were other things that were happening in the locker room that were not good with Jaden Ivey. There were other things within the confines of the Bulls locker room that were occurring, and nobody was really happy about it. We'll just call it that. Bulls head coach Billy Donovan told reporters before Monday night's game that the team hoped Ivey could be part of its long-term future when it acquired him, but he did not come to an agreement with a contract extension with Detroit. He'll be a free agent, and Billy Donovan said this, quote, "There's a certain level of expectations and standards that are here. Everybody comes with their own personal experiences, right? But we all have to be professional. There has to be a high level of respect for one another, and we've got to help each other and be accountable to those standards." And Jaden Ivey clearly wasn't, per Billy Donovan. Now, a short time ago, Ivey went back on Instagram Live as he was boarding a plane and continued to rant about the Chicago Bulls and continued to rant about how he's a good teammate and so on and so forth. And honestly, that is not what you want to be doing right now if you're Jaden Ivey. What you want to be doing right now is getting with your agent, getting with your PR team, if you have one, and trying to spin this in a positive light. But let's be completely frank and clear here. There is no way to spin this in a positive light if you're Jaden Ivey. There's just not. And for Jaden Ivey, this is as bad as it can get. This is a one-way ticket to being out of the league. It is a one-way ticket for you to no longer be a part of anything that is, without question, what you want to be. You want to be a part of a growing culture, right? You want to be a part of a growing expectation, right? And in this instance here, Jaden Ivey has worked his way out of the league. There will not be another team this year that will take a flyer on him. I don't believe. If there is, there's going to be some serious questions from the NBA. There's going to be some serious questions from fans, and rightfully so. And more importantly, there's going to be some questions about whether or not he should even play in the NBA. I mean, let's be clear about it here. And if he does, then there has to be some there has to absolutely be some sensitivity training, something along the lines there. But in terms of what this means for the Chicago Bulls, and let's just be clear here. The Bulls are in a really bad spot right now. The Bulls made multiple trades and picked this guy up. Nobody else wanted him, not even Detroit. And now, with that, and because of that, Arturas Karnisovas has some explaining to do. And Arturas Karnisovas has some, well, let's just call it what it is. He's the worst general manager, worst president of basketball operations in sports right now. And in the NBA, you could argue he's the worst executive in Chicago. You could argue at this point he's the worst executive in sports. And because of that, I believe that Arturas Karnisovas should not be employed any longer by the Chicago Bulls. Not because of what he's done, but because of his botches left and right that have really made things difficult for the Chicago Bulls. And let's just call it what it is here. He has turned this once very proud franchise into a laughingstock And, Joe Cowley, who writes for the Sun-Times in Chicago, is he's all on top of this. And he has said, look, there's more than just this going on. This was the final straw, and the locker room won't shed a tear over it. And he's right. The Bulls waived him, and look, this looks bad. This looks really bad for the Bulls. And the Bulls need to hire somebody as a president of basketball operations that will or that can fix this. And it's not AK, and it's not Mark Eversley. And there has been talk already of change coming to Chicago this offseason. Well, now I can almost guarantee they're going to be looking for a new president of basketball operations, and they're going to be looking for a new GM, and they're probably going to be looking for a new head coach. This is the perfect setup for Billy Donovan getting out of Chicago to thus go be with the North Carolina Tar Heels. It just lines up. It's too perfect. It's just absolutely too perfect. And what better way for Billy Donovan to go out than to say, you know what, this is a little too dysfunctional for my liking. I'm going to take the buyout. I'm going to go, I'm going to go with North Carolina. I'm going to work with them, work with the kids, where I've got more control. Yada yada yada. I don't want to rebuild. I don't want to be a part of that. Let me out of my contract. And he'll get paid handsomely by North Carolina. They'll buy him out of Chicago, and that's all it's going to be. That's all it's going to take. And for that, Billy Donovan will be done in Chicago, and rightfully so. And with Billy Donovan being done in Chicago, that leads to questions: who will be the next head coach? And I'm telling you right here and now, it's not going to be Jon Scheyer from Duke. I don't know who you bring in, to be honest with you, but I know it's not going to be him, especially after what happened last night. The other part of all of this is that Jerry and Michael Reinsdorf now have a big problem on their hands. And that will cause Jerry to, for lack of a better term, force Michael into working and coming to work to fix what Arturas Karnisovas has started. And if you're with us on TikTok or YouTube Live, I apologize as I'm having an issue here with my mic tonight. I can't get it set how I like. So, yeah, anyway. This is a real bad look for Chicago. Yeah, exactly, John. And look, you're right. He might file a lawsuit claiming religious discrimination. It goes against his beliefs. But I don't look. I believe in Joe Cowley. I believe what Joe Cowley says here, and Joe Cowley makes it very, very clear that this is not a one-time thing here with Jaden Ivey. It's just not. This looks like it's more of an issue that has been going on within the locker room amongst other things, or on top of other things. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And look, quite honestly, if this is the straw that breaks the camel's back, in terms of Billy Donovan leaving Chicago, then so be it. And I believe that Ian O'Connor, who is a columnist with The Athletic, he's a 6-time New York Times bestselling author. He was on 104.3 The Score earlier today and said, in no way in uncertain terms, he believes Billy Donovan will return to college in the next few years. And what better time to do that than right now, when one of the most prestigious organizations in college is looking for a new head coach in North Carolina. And for Chicago, look, this is a worst-case scenario. Jaden Ivey on this, and it looks like he was on TikTok as well. Jaden Ivey goes off about Steph Curry's religious beliefs. Look, this is a huge indictment on Arturas Karnisovas. And Bleacher Nation, has a really interesting story on it. It's just not good. And I really wish I had a better stance on it, other than this goes against what Jaden Ivey or this goes against what the Chicago Bulls and more what Arturas Karnisovas thought they were getting. And, buyer beware, buyer remorse, right? Well, they've got a big case now of buyer remorse. And, he hasn't been the same player. And Karnisovas should be next. He's picked up several second-round draft picks in return for Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, and Nikola Vucevic. And they held on way too long to those players, as we've talked about. And they have failed to tank. They have failed to win. They have failed to capitalize on any potential momentum that they could have had with Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine. They continue to show, for lack of a better term, unawareness of what the modern NBA looks like. And with that, Karnisovas, look, let's look at it this way, okay? Holding on to DeMar DeRozan, okay? Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic. Those three guys right then and there. The Bulls, had they made better decisions timing-wise, they would have absolutely gotten a first-round pick for Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso, and probably DeMar DeRozan. But they held on way too long, and now it's botched them. Now, yes, they got Josh Giddey back, but let's be honest here. Everybody and anybody that follows this show knows I'm not the biggest fan of Josh Giddey. And that is quite honestly because he just isn't a good player, in my opinion. He's just not. Now, the Bulls have, with Karnisovas, had massive draft misses. And I mean massive draft misses. Just think about it this way. In 2020, the Bulls, the club, drafted Patrick Williams over Tyrese Halliburton and Tyrese Maxey, as well as over Aaron Nesmith, Isaiah Stewart, Peyton Pritchard, Jaden McDaniels, and Desmond Bane. And that's an issue in and of itself. Perhaps the second biggest was when Karnisovas signed Patrick Williams to a 5 years, $90 million deal in restricted free agency. Last summer, he selected rotational forward Noah Essengay over Derek Queen, Carter Bryant, Hugo Gonzalez, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and Maxime Reynaud. Chicago also passed up the opportunity to trade that pick that became Essengay to the New Orleans Pelicans for an unprotected 2026 draft pick. Given now that the Pelicans are destined for the lottery, that's a huge mistake, unless if Noah Essengay blossoms into a player that, quite honestly, it's going to take him 5 years to become. drafting Dalen Terry with the number 18 pick in 2022 over guys like Jake LaRavia, Christian Braun, Walter Kessler, Peyton Watson, Andrew Nemhard, Jalen Williams, and Rolling Meadows High School alum Max Christie, has already come back to haunt Karnisovas. The Bulls have been stuck in the mud during Karnisovas' 6-season tenure. God, has it only been 6 years? Wow. That spring, the Bulls got banged up and were obliterated in 5 games against Milwaukee. But Karnisovas botched his team building by offloading multiple draft picks, including his notorious deal to ship 2 eventual lottery selections, which became Franz Wagner and Anthony Black, to Orlando for Nikola Vucevic. Now, at the time, Vucevic was considered a really good player. And look, Vuce played well for the first 3 years. Excuse me. After that, it became apparent he wasn't as good as he should have been, or what the Bulls thought. That's just a small glimpse into what Arturas Karnisovas has done. It is just a small sample. And now everything else on top of that shows how bad of a president of basketball operations he has been. Never mind the fact that when tank mode should have been embraced by Chicago, never mind the fact that the Bulls, quite honestly, had a number of different reporters say, well, why don't you, plan for the draft? Why don't you, expect to do more with the draft? And Karnisovas said, we want to win right now. Our window is open. No, AK, it's not. Your window wasn't open, it hasn't been open, and it won't be open. And honestly, I believe that the Bulls need a full factory reset. Okay? They need to have a full reset in the sense that, you know what? You need to tear this thing down to the studs. Let's just be honest here. You have to. And if you don't, you're going to continue to be in basketball hell for the next 5-10 years. And you're going to miss out on a number of really good players in this year's draft. Let's just be honest here. So, that's what's happening in the world of the NBA right now. Now, with Chicago and with this issue here that they are running into, and let's just call it that, it's an issue. Okay? It's a bump in the road. It is something that the Bulls will ultimately have to move on from, and they will. But because of all of this, it puts their organization back in a light that, quite honestly, it hasn't been in a very long time. And this goes back all the way to the Tim Floyd years, where they looked directionless. They looked like a ship lost at sea. And I don't believe there's any way around it. They are absolutely floundering right now. And honestly, it just looks bad. It just looks really, really bad for Chicago. And as a proud Bulls fan, I pray that they get this figured out, because when the Bulls are better, the NBA is better. And when they suck, it's horrible. It makes February and March getting to Major League Baseball so long, so incredibly long. And it makes it makes basketball not fun to be a part of until March, when March Madness happens. And as a sports fan, and as a fan of the of all the major sports, basketball was always a big love of mine because of the Bulls, and of course because of Michael Jeffrey Jordan. But with that, when they lost Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and Phil Jackson and the core, and they brought in Tim Floyd, everybody knew it was a bad idea. Just like everybody knew it was a bad idea to fire Tom Thibodeau and bring in Fred Hoiberg. Hoiberg has been a disappointment in the NBA. He did not pan out the way that they wanted. And his team was a player away in the Elite Eight from going to the Final Four, because that's right, Iowa only had 4 players on the floor. Or excuse me, Nebraska only had 4 players on the floor in that game against, or in the Sweet 16, against Iowa. And that caused Iowa to win. So, Fred Hoiberg is a very good college coach. We know that. And he will continue to be a good college coach. Tom Thibodeau, I believe, will be a very good NBA head coach again. He absolutely deserves another shot. The rap on him being a hard-nosed, authoritarian guy that plays his starters far too often, doesn't use the bench, so on and so forth. It's all garbage. It's all garbage. Let's just be honest here. So, with that, we move on to bigger and better things. And John, yes, we were leading towards the NCAA anyway, and you just took us there. Stokes, who is the number one player in high school, is committing tomorrow either to Kansas or to Kentucky. I have a sneaking suspicion, based upon the inability of Kentucky to look good, it's going to be Kansas. Just a hunch. I don't know anything, but it's just a hunch that I have. And quite honestly, it will be, if it is Kansas, I guarantee you that they will absolutely be screaming at that point for Mark Pope to be fired from Kentucky if they can't land him. And yeah, I believe, John, that'll be a catalyst to bring back Bill Self. I think that will ultimately turn or lead to Bill Self coming back. And I don't think Self is going anywhere just yet. I think he still has enough gas in the tank. We'll just put it that way. And I think that having somebody like Stokes, who's very highly recruited, having Stokes come back, that's a big deal. That's a big part of it. And look, for everything that is wrong in college basketball and college sports, let's just be honest here. Signing day is always fun. And it's become such a spectacle now that you see it featured in video games, whether it's for baseball, for football. It's all a part of the lexicon that is becoming watching college sports. And I believe that it is absolutely a paramount part of the game anymore. The recruiting process, the signing day, and ultimately what leads to, the fun of it all. And again, with the opportunity to greatly improve your team right away with really solid players, everybody knows that it's just part of the lexicon now. It's part of what we do. I mean, we look at college recruiting day. For NCAA, we look at free agency in the NFL, in Major League Baseball, and the NBA. You look at all of it, and it's all a part of what we've become to know as our sports engagement and our sports watching, and how we want to experience it, and how we want to enjoy it. And that is all a massive part now of how, at least for me, how I take sports in. And I am looking forward to seeing how tomorrow shakes out with Stokes. Again, I have a feeling it's going to be Kansas. I just do. The portal opens on the 7th, which is big. Maybe we'll have some clarity by then. Maybe we'll have some clarity in terms of who's coaching North Carolina, or if nothing else, we'll have some clarity in terms of, okay, who's Carolina going after? Who could be the coach leading them? And again, I truly believe it's going to be Billy Donovan. I truly believe that. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But then where does Billy Donovan end up? Where does Billy Donovan end up? That'll be the $1 million question at that point. All right, let's take a timeout. We're going to talk, we're going to hear from our friends over at I Know a Guy Remodeling. And then from there, we'll come back here with more to discuss on the Last Row Podcast. Stay with us. You know, there's nothing like opening day. Fresh grass, clean uniforms, 0 losses, everybody's in first place, and spring is your home's opening day too. New season, new projects, new expectations. If your kitchen's been in a slump, if your bathroom's on the injured list, if your basement looks like it got sent down to AAA, well then it's time for a call-up. And that call-up is I Know a Guy Remodeling. They bring big league results with precision, power, and veteran leadership. From full remodels to smart upgrades, they don't do minor league work. They build home field advantage. This season, don't just hope for a turnaround. Make the move with I Know a Guy Remodeling. You can check them out and a link to their Facebook page on our website, www.lastrowpodcast.com, because everybody deserves to know a guy. And now you do. I Know a Guy Remodeling. All right, welcome back, everybody. Back to the show, the Last Row Podcast. All right, let's continue our conversation here. We are just mere days away from the Final Four. And Brad Underwood, head coach of the Fighting Illini, was on the Score 104.3 in Chicago today. And he mentioned that he was watching film this morning. And normally in the mornings, it's a cup of coffee, some quiet time, and watching film. And he said this morning that he would add nausea to that routine this morning because he went back and he looked at the Illini versus UConn game that took place earlier this season in November. And Brad Underwood said that it's not a fair assessment to look at that game and say, well, it's going to be the same result. Because Brad Underwood said they are a completely different team, and he's exactly right. Illinois is a much different team now than what they were in November. And so that leads me to my next thought. And that's what if? What if Illinois wins? Now, there was some, and John, I was just going to say that. There was some videos circulating on the internet today showing Dan Hurley getting in the face, if you will, of an official. Now, that official has known Dan Hurley for years, and they are close off the court. Perhaps that's why there was no technical called. Perhaps that's why, the official wasn't looking at the bench, per se, when one of their players ran onto the floor, which would have been an automatic technical. Now, I'm not crying over this for Duke. Believe me, I'm not. But what I'm saying here is that Dan Hurley's got to be real careful. He's already got a reputation in the NCAA as being very cocky, as being very arrogant. And look, it rubs many people the wrong way. And I get that. I understand that. However, the old saying is, act like you've been there before, right? Well, for Dan Hurley, they were there in 23 or 24 and 25. Excuse me. No, it was 23 and 24. And UConn was, and for many years prior to Dan Hurley, it was a standard bearer. You measured yourself against the best, right? With Jim Calhoun and Kevin Ollie and now Dan Hurley. All three of those coaches have won national titles. So what does that mean for Illinois? Well, if you go back and you watch the game against UConn early in the year, Illinois was so outmatched. Now it's a different team. You have by far one of the best point guards in the country in Keaton Wagler, who realistically is becoming one of the best players in the country. And you have Andrej Stojakovic, who is one of the best players to come off the bench in the country. He would be starting on every other team realistically. And John, I don't know if he sold his soul to the devil for going for number 3 in 4 years. But I will say this much. He's a damn good coach. And he can coach as well as anybody in the NCAAs. And whether it's through UConn, whether it's Tom Izzo, whether it's Illinois coming up this weekend, look, everybody is going to be watching that game. And I believe that it's going to be a much closer game than what people think. Illinois right now is playing some of the best defense in the entire country. And to me, that says this. If Illinois plays like they did against Houston in the second half, if Illinois is able to play like they did against Iowa in the second half, where defense dominates and leads to offense, and their bigs play like bigs, and Andrej Stojakovic plays like his father and continues to be a menace in the paint, I think it's absolutely going to be a much bigger night for Illinois. Look, this is their best chance that they've had to win a national title since 2005. And realistically, and you've heard me say this, Illinois has the best opportunity here. On paper, that team can play with anybody. On paper, that team can play with anybody. And with that, Illinois now has the opportunity. And if Illinois can get the job done against UConn, then one has to wonder if it's Arizona or Michigan. The Fighting Illini are going to be a very difficult out. And the narrative has changed, at least in this podcast host opinion, on Brad Underwood. And for all of the grief and all of the talking points that were made, Brad Underwood is a damn good coach. And Underwood has done a phenomenal job turning Illinois into a perennial NCAA tournament contender. And without question, Illinois is going to have a very, very, very difficult fight against UConn on Saturday night. But there's a very good chance that the Fighting Illini will continue to rewrite the narrative that John Gross, no pun intended, grossly did to them by trying to coach them like a mid-major. With Brad Underwood, he's coaching them like a Power 4 team. And good on Illinois for finding the guy that can do that. Illinois was his dream job. And with Illinois being his dream job, he is wanting to do everything in his power to get a national title. And this is, without question, their best opportunity in Champaign-Urbana since 1989 and Lute Olson and the Flying Illini. So Illinois has their best shot. Can UConn ride the wave of momentum of the miracle against Duke? It's a great question to ponder. And it's one that we're going to talk about the rest of the week. And Reagan, I was getting to that point next. In terms of Duke and Jon Scheyer, there has been a lot made of their exit the last 2 years. Losing a 14-point lead last year in the Final Four to Houston, and then this year losing a 19-point lead in taking on UConn. And if you recall, Jon Scheyer went and showed his team exactly what to do because he showed film of former Duke Blue Devil Trey Jones doing the same thing that he wanted his guys to do by holding onto the ball or throw it in the air. Trey Jones did that for the Chicago Bulls this past season. And yes, Duke's not getting rid of him. We know that. But there could start to be some questions here about Duke. And we talked about it last night. We mentioned how the Dukies have a narrative now. And that narrative is they're not as dominant. They don't have that fourth quarter ability to strangle their opponent, to put a chokehold on them, to do however you want to call it. Okay? Duke doesn't have that. They don't have that killer instinct now. And that has to change with Jon Scheyer. And if that doesn't change for Jon Scheyer, that's a problem. And again, he had a very good team. The Boozer Boys, and Danny Hurley made mention of this. The Boozer Boys always win. They win at every level. And Danny Hurley was following them back in their high school days, in their AAU days. And rightfully so, because look, they're the sons of a really, really good NBA player in Carlos Boozer. Now, Carlos Boozer is not going to make the Hall of Fame, but he's a Hall of Very Good, right? So why not have his sons be or become better than he could? Well, quite honestly, I think his sons have the opportunity to. But the bigger question here becomes, what does it say about Jon Scheyer? What does it say about Jon Scheyer? Jon Scheyer has to get some Krzyzewski in him. And what I mean by that, it's quite simple. He's got to be able to get guys that can not only play the game right, but that can close games out. He needs a closer. He needs a Max Crosby, if you will. He needs a Christian Laettner. There's a Duke name for everybody that hates Duke or that loves Duke. You either love Duke or you hate Duke. Me personally, I don't care one way or the other. But I know this much. Duke always had really good closers. Under Jon Scheyer, so far, they don't. And until they get a good closer, until they get somebody like a J.J. Redick that they could go to in the clutch, like an Elton Brand that could seal the game for them, they're going to struggle. And they're not going to make a Final Four. Or they might make the Final Four, and they're not going to win a national title. And with the way NIL is, and the way things are with NIL, look, let's be honest here. There's a really good chance that they're going to reload this upcoming offseason, and they're going to have an opportunity to run it back with their squad, with new guys and new players. But the question will become, can Jon Scheyer make the adjustments needed at the coaching level? At the coaching level to get things right? That's the question. That's the major question. And so my question becomes now, what happens if or when? We know Boozers, I think one or both of them are going to go to the NBA. We know that already. The question that I have is, can Duke recoup? Can they reset and make another run next year? I agree. I believe Caden needs to stay. I agree with you, Reagan. He needs to work on his game. He also needs to redeem himself. He needs to. And if he doesn't, if he decides he wants to go, he's going to end up probably either riding the bench for the first year, or he's going to be on such a bad team, it's not going to matter. It won't matter one bit. And that's the sad thing. But I believe he'll be back. And I believe that will put a chip on his shoulder to be, without question, one of the better players next year in the NCAA tournament. Now, a bigger question is who's going to become the coach at UNC? Who will now be the coach at Kentucky if they let go of Mark Pope? Who might the coach be at Kansas if Bill Self leaves? Now, I don't believe Bill Self is leaving. I've said that earlier on the show. But let's just be honest here. There's always that question. of what if. And yeah, John, you're right. There are a number of mock drafts that have 8 freshmen going in the first 8 picks. And Monty, you're right. He does have health issues. We know that. And he's addressed it, and he's said it. He's going to talk to his family. And I get that, and that's a very good move on his part. But let's call it what it is here. Will Kansas be able, depending on who they bring in, will Kansas be able to run it back next year? And I think a lot of that has to do with tomorrow, with signing day. And if they get Stokes or not. If they get Stokes, I think Bill Self is back. If they don't get Stokes, I don't know. All right, moving on. The NFL owners' meetings started earlier today. And let's just be honest here. The story coming out, Mr. First Down, how are you, my good friend? Good to see you. Thank you so much for stopping on in. Folks, if you haven't visited or seen Mr. First Down's podcast, you need to. You absolutely need to. He's everybody's favorite Titans fan, including yours truly. And he absolutely knows everything and anything Tennessee. Good to see you, sir. The talking point today at the owners' meetings was the NFL officiating debacle and what's going on with it and how they are prepping for the likelihood that they're going to have replacement officials in play. And that's a problem. That's a problem for the NFL. And that's something that needs to get addressed and get fixed and get done right away. Because we talked last year, and if you were with us in the beginning of the program, if you were with us in the beginning of the podcast, quite honestly, it was very simply the officiating has to get better. They've got to be more consistent. And for this, right now, the NFL needs their officials. The NFL needs their officials. And the NFL has to have their head guys there. We can't go into the season with replacement officials. We just can't. And I think as a fan of the NFL, that is something that worries me. That is something that is a problem. And I'm not sure how it gets rectified and how it gets resolved. But the fact of the matter is this. For the NFL, they have to get the officiating right. They have to come to some semblance of an agreement. And if they're able to, then everything will be good. If they're not able to, you're going to have replacement officials in regular season games, and that's not going to enhance the experience for anybody watching. I promise you that. Couple of other things. Per Pro Football Talk, the Packers have discussed bringing in Kirk Cousins as Jordan Love's backup. Now, I have to tell you this. As a Chicago Bears fan, I am absolutely all for this. Please, yes, bring Kirk Cousins in. Yes, please do so. And here's why. Jordan Love never plays a full season. And when he does, or if he does, that's typically not good for Green Bay. Because he has a few games where he'll throw a ball or two that you just have to question, why is he doing that? But Kirk Cousins is old and slow. He's not mobile. And while it looks as if he would be a natural fit in that offense, the bigger issue here is that If Jordan Love struggles, do they bring Kirk Cousins in? And that's the question that I have for Packer fans. That's the question that I bring up for the Packers and for Packer fans. Do they bring in Kirk Cousins if Jordan Love struggles? If Jordan Love doesn't get the job done in, let's say, the first 4 games, do they bring Kirk Cousins in and say that's enough on the Jordan Love experiment? There were reports last year that Matt LaFleur was not happy with Jordan Love. And when Malik Willis came in, the offense ran how it should have. I have to wonder. You have to ask that question. What happens if or when Jordan Love doesn't produce like he should? I have to ask the question. I think it bears answering. Why would they sign Kirk Cousins, a veteran backup who's been a starter in this league? Yeah, Monty, you bring up a really good question. Who would they rather have, Cousins or Bagent? I think if Love or Williams gets hurt, they're both dead. I agree with you. But I'd like Tyson Bagent because he's younger. He's more athletic. Kirk Cousins is going to stand in the pocket. Kirk Cousins is going to fumble the ball away. So, look, I believe this is a bad signing for Green Bay if it happens. And it raises more questions to me than it provides answers about their thought and their belief in Jordan Love. And Reagan, I agree with you. I agree wholeheartedly with you. He didn't come from a big program. No offense to Utah State. But he didn't come from a Power 5 conference. He didn't play meaningful ball in December. He sat behind Aaron Rodgers, which is probably as good as you could have it in that offense, in learning how to read a defense. And overall, he's been okay. But I don't think he's the star that everybody thinks he is. I don't believe that Jordan Love is the second coming or third coming in this instance of the next great Green Bay Packer quarterback. I just don't. And I wonder if potentially they feel that by bringing in Kirk Cousins as a backup, if that's their insurance policy, if this doesn't go well. I have to ask that question. And I don't believe Matt LaFleur likes Jordan Love that much. I think they look at him as a mentor, but I believe that Jordan Love is middle of the pack. No pun intended. And if he's middle of the pack in quarterbacks, that's a problem in Green Bay. They're used to having top-tier quarterbacks. And if Jordan Love is not that top-tier quarterback, that's a big problem. And you're right, Reagan. That's exactly what made Favre so nervous was he knew Rodgers had the potential. Rodgers could have very easily started day one. Now, was it a smart idea for him to sit? Absolutely it was. If you have a veteran that's like Brett Favre that plays at a Hall of Fame caliber level, absolutely you bring him in. And you let him learn. And if Brett Favre doesn't want to teach him, then by God, you let the second stringer teach him. But Aaron Rodgers was just a different cat. Let's just be honest here. And yeah, Monty, I get it. He threw for 21 touchdowns, 6 picks. I get it. But when it mattered most, Jordan Love struggled. He struggled, and that's a problem. That's a problem for Green Bay. All right, other news and notes coming out of the first meeting. We know who will be on Hard Knocks. The Seahawks and the Patriots will serve as the next two Hard Knocks teams. The Seahawks will be in 2026, the Patriots in 2027. So, let's talk about it. I think it's a brilliant idea to have these two teams represent the next 2 years. And then you know what? I think whoever's in the Super Bowl next year, they're the next two. I think they also need to amend their rules. And what I mean by that is this. If you hire a new head coach, guess what? You can still be on Hard Knocks. It just adds for more content. And Hard Knocks is such a staple in the NFL off-season anyway, in training camp, that it just makes sense to do it that way. It just makes sense to do it that way. So there's that. On top of that, there was a very lengthy interview today done on Pro Football Talk with Kevin Warren, Chicago Bears president. And he talked about the new stadium. And Kevin Warren said today, by late spring or even early summer, they're going to know where they're going to go. They're going to know where this new state-of-the-art stadium is going to be built. I'm going to tell you this right here and now. If it was going to be Indiana, they'd announced it already. They would have announced it. They're waiting on Illinois. They're waiting to see what Illinois comes back with. They've got everything done in Illinois other than getting the signatures. They've already had the soil testing. They've already had the land development done. They've already got the land, 326 acres bought and paid for. They don't have that yet in Indiana. They don't have the soil tested. They don't have the land bought. They have none of that. That's why I believe Chicago is going to go to Arlington Heights. And it's always been about Arlington Heights. And I said it from the start, Indiana was and is leverage. Because of all the foundries that are there, because of all of the foundries and the stench and the soil and how contaminated the soil is, the Bears would have to pay millions upon millions for soil remediation, for soil reconditioning. And if that presents itself and Indiana comes back with, yeah, the soil's not good, the Bears are going to be right back where they are now, which is at Arlington Heights. Now, Monty brings up a great question. What does the city do with Soldier Field? Well, look, I'll be honest with you. I think that's when the NFL expands and brings a second team to Chicago. It's been talked about for years. It has been talked about for years. There's no reason why the third biggest media market can't have a second team. None. So I think they do that. I think whoever owns that team needs to make a deal with the city to purchase the field outright from the Park District, if that's even an option. If they make them an offer they can't refuse. And let's just say, just for kicks and giggles here, it's Jeff Bezos, okay, owner of Amazon, who loves Chicago, by the way. If Bezos were to buy the expansion team or have the expansion team for Chicago, when that happens, he has outside income that he can use to pay for renovations to Soldier Field. He can pay for the stadium outright. And he can absolutely have a stadium of his own. And the city of Chicago would take it. I would bet dollars to donuts that they would take it. Yeah, Monty, look, I agree with you that they want to expand in new cities, but you know what? If the city of Chicago goes to them after the Bears leave for Arlington Heights and say, hey, you know what? We've got a stadium here, and our new owner, Jeff Bezos, he's going to purchase that stadium. He's going to renovate it. He's going to do what the Bears should have done here. So you need another NFL team here. I guarantee you the NFL would say, yep, you know what? You're right. Why not have another team in the third biggest media market? You can make that same argument for Kansas City. Absolutely you could. When they leave Arrowhead, yes. What will Arrowhead do? I know for Chicago, there's talk of, a new concerts and, so on and so forth. That's great, but what are you going to do in November and December when it's cold out? You're going to have a football stadium sitting empty. That's not going to work for the city. They're going to be losing money left and right. And then that stadium, which is a national landmark, would be left to ruin. The Chicago Fire are going to have a new stadium, so it's not going to be the MLS soccer team. The White Sox are going to have a new stadium if they stay in Chicago. The Cubs aren't doing anything with Wrigley. So it only makes sense for the NFL to try to get another team in Chicago. Look, Texas has got it. California's got it. New York's got it. Ohio has more teams than Illinois. Come on. The third biggest media market, you need another team. And again, I think it makes sense. If they were to move a team to Chicago or do an expansion team in Chicago, it would work. An AFC team in Chicago? Why couldn't it work? You have the White Sox and the Cubs. You have the Giants and the Jets. You've got the Rams and the 49ers within the same division. You've got the Bengals and the Browns. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Miami, Jacksonville, Tampa Bay. It just makes sense. And if you have a stadium that's right there, that's NFL approved already, mind you, why wouldn't you do it? Why not? What are hours apart? Forgive me, Monty, but what are hours apart? The Rams and the Chargers, they're based in L.A. Right, Philly and Pittsburgh, I get that, but they're the same state. So what? Okay, right. Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa, I get all that. New York, New York. LA, LA. Chicago, Chicago. It makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. Now, will it happen right away? No, I don't think it will. But if the NFL can increase revenues, like we know they want to, and we know they're capable of doing, why wouldn't they put another team in Chicago? Oh, come on, Monty. LA shouldn't have two teams. Are you kidding me? What happened to the Rams and the Raiders? I'm just saying. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. It's good business for the NFL to do that. Yeah, and then they came back. They came back. Then you bring in the Chargers, like they did. I know it's a horrible football town. I get that. But it's revenue. It's all about revenue. I'm saying they're going to expand to other areas besides Chicago. I'm not saying they're going to have. They're not going to bring in an expansion team to Chicago and not have another team ready to go. In other words, so they may have Utah and Chicago, or they may have. Excuse me. They may have. I don't know, Idaho and Chicago. You know what I mean? They'll figure out how to expand. Or London and Chicago. You know what I mean? It just makes sense. I'm just saying that the third biggest media market could absolutely have two teams. It could absolutely have it. Otherwise, Illinois is going to be on the hook, and Chicago is going to be on the hook for Soldier Field. And I do too, Reagan. I agree. I think we're way away from London. I agree with you. But I don't think we're that far away, especially if the Bears move and the city of Chicago gets in the ear of Roger Goodell and says, hey, you know what? The city of Chicago is willing to, let go of Soldier Field to the right owner. And, if it's Jeff Bezos, hey, I'm just saying, he could renovate this. The state's already given us the go-ahead to talk to him about it. I'm just saying. I agree, Monty. I think St. Louis gets a team. I agree with you. Or maybe that's the move, St. Louis and Chicago. St. Louis comes back to the NFC. Chicago gets an AFC team. Why not? I think it works. I'm just saying. Crazier things have happened. Am I right? Crazier things have happened. But I agree with you. St. Louis did get screwed. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And I think they do deserve a team. I wholeheartedly do. What other state would be a good NFL market? I think Utah would. I think Utah would make perfect sense. Yep, Salt Lake City. It's where the Jazz are based at. Orlando, yeah, you've got all the family area right there at Disney. Absolutely. Yeah, I think Salt Lake City makes sense. You've got the Jazz there and the Mammoth. Cinema Toast Crunch, let me ask you this. What state deserves another NFL team? Or could do an NFL team? Or could have an NFL team? So far, we've said Utah, we've said St. Louis, we've said Orlando, Florida. I still think Chicago. What city in America could benefit from an NFL team that could sustain it? I really don't know where else you would go. Yeah, I mean, I think there's issues though with. I mean, look, I think honestly, Jacksonville is probably the leading front runner to get moved to London, and that's because of their owner, Shad Khan. If that were to ever happen. But again, I think it makes it. Yes, and I know they're rebuilding their stadium. I know that, but the Khans have more money than most owners. That they would be able to utilize that money to have another team buy that stadium or something. I'm just saying. But again, I think Salt Lake City is a solid case. I think St. Louis is a good case. We'll have to see what happens. The NFL wants to expand. They want more media markets. They want more revenue. So why not do it? And that's going to put a bow on this edition of the Last Row Podcast. We will be back with you tomorrow night from the ARM Media Solutions Studios. Yeah, perhaps Canada. Perhaps Toronto. That makes sense. Or Montreal. I agree. I want to thank our friends over at I Know a Guy Remodeling and Forever Finds Thrift for their continued support of the program. I want to thank you, our listeners, whether it is on Amazon or it is on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening, for subscribing, for being a part of our show. Those of you on social media, on TikTok Live, on Twitter or X, thank you for joining us. Those of you that are on YouTube, thank you for joining us. And until next time, when breaking news changes everything, I'll see you in the last row.